Hey, I'm Jusko from ProudMoney.com, and in this video we are going to look at the best fair credit or average credit cards on the market. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel if you've not already. And if you have already, I thank you for doing so. So fair credit cards or average credit cards, these are for, at least for purposes of this video, credit scores between 600 and 700. And there actually is kind of a big difference between 600 and 700, which we'll talk about in a second. But either way, that whole area is sort of a gray area where if you have a credit score in that place, you might not be sure what you can qualify for versus having excellent credit where you know you can get anything, or having really bad credit where you know you can't get anything. So we're going to talk about that further. Now, if you have sort of average credit or fair credit, there could be a number of reasons for it. Maybe you had bad credit and you clawed your way back up into this sort of middle zone. Maybe you don't have much credit. You haven't had much of a credit history, and so you haven't had much of a chance yet to really get your credit score higher. Or maybe you had credit in the past and you haven't had credit for a very long time, and so your credit score has sort of slid from where maybe it was in the past. Now, when I talk about credit scores in this video, I'm going to be talking specifically about FICO credit scores. FICO, or Fair Isaac Company, the originator of the credit scoring model and the model that is still used in the majority of lending decisions. Now, if you are getting a free credit score from somewhere, it may be a FICO score, but it also could be a Vantage score. Vantage score is a competing credit scoring model. There oftentimes is going to be a difference between the two. I think that in general, Vantage score tends to be a little bit higher than FICO score. Some people say that they haven't had that experience, but that is what I believe to be true. So when you look at the numbers that I'm talking about, know that I'm talking FICO and not Vantage score. Now, FICO defines fair credit as a score between 580 and 669. I have already said that for purposes of this video, we are going to use 600 to 700 as sort of that gray area, that fair credit area. The reason for that is I think that that is what the majority of credit card lenders would say is sort of that fair average credit area where things could go either way for your credit card application. Under 600, probably you're getting into bad credit more than you are fair credit as far as credit card lenders are concerned. Over 700, you'll probably be approved for most credit cards unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance. It's between 600 and 700 where I think there is the most question. If you think I'm wrong on this, feel free to debate that in the comments section below. All right, so having established 600 to 700 as the fair credit or average credit range, at least for this video, I'm actually going to break that range up into 3 chunks, and we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So if you have a credit score between 600 and 620 or 600 and 625, somewhere in that area, you're pretty low in the fair credit range. You're not very far removed from bad credit. Maybe you had bad credit and you've managed to work your way back up a little bit, or maybe you've slid a little bit, but not so terrible yet. In that range, you're not going to have a lot of great options usually. A card that many people get when they're in this 600 to 620 or 625 range is the Capital One Platinum card. It is an unsecured card. You don't have to put a security deposit down, has no annual fee. It's going to have kind of a high interest rate. It's not going to have any frills. You're not going to get any rewards from this card, but it's not going to charge you anything. And Capital One is known to work with people that do have these lower credit scores, and this is pretty much their entry level unsecured credit card. So many people have had the Capital One Platinum card and been very happy that Capital One gave them the chance when nobody else would when they had a lower credit score. In addition to the Capital One Platinum, there are some other cards to talk about here as well. Petal is a card that came out on the market within the last few years. There's actually 2 cards from Petal now, Petal 1 and Petal 2, terrible naming. But anyway, Petal 1 is more for people that have a lower credit score because maybe they've had some past credit problems, where Petal 2 is more for people that maybe their credit score is a little lower because they haven't had credit before, or they've had very little credit. Petal has a pre-approval form on their website where you can put your information in and you can see which one they would offer to you. But Petal 1 is the newer version, so they've kind of gone down a little bit in terms of going after people that maybe have a little lower credit score. Now, a card that could be an option in this 600 to 625 range and might come as a surprise is the Apple Card. When the Apple credit card was first introduced, you would have assumed that it was for people with a little higher credit score. But if you look in their marketing materials, look in their support materials, they talk about 600 as sort of a dividing line, where if you're under 600, you probably would not get approved, but maybe over 600 you would. And Apple and Goldman Sachs, the actual issuer of the card, they give you a setup where when you apply, they will actually tell you, it's sort of a pre-approval with a soft pull on your credit, so you're not going to get a hard hit if you get a decline for the card. They're basically going to tell you if you're going to be approved and if you're not going to be approved. So you sort of have nothing to lose there, because if they say no, well then you don't have a hard pull on your credit and you can just go on your way. In addition, Apple also has what they call the Path to Apple Card program, where some people, when they apply, even if they're declined, they may get invited into this Path to Apple Card program, where if they do certain things right over a 30-day, 60-day period, I'm not quite sure what it is, which Apple will tell you, well then you could be invited to apply for the card again, with the assumption that you would be approved at that time. Now, not everyone gets invited into that program. I have a feeling it has to do with income. The higher your income, the more they might want you, or if you have maybe too much debt and a decent income, if you can get that debt down, well then they would invite you to come back to the card. But anyway, Apple and Goldman Sachs sort of open to people with lower credit scores, perhaps surprisingly. Now, there's some other credit cards that could be good choices if you are in this sort of lower fair credit range, the 600 to 620 or 625, but you have to be careful, because a lot of these companies will work with people that are sort of in the lower fair credit space, but they'll also work with people that have bad credit. And so you have to watch the terms and conditions that you might be offered, because some people might get no annual fee and a okay interest rate, where other people might get a really big annual fee and a terrible interest rate. So you have to make sure you understand what you're getting. Card companies I am thinking of in this space include Merrick Bank, Avant, there is the new Prosper credit card, the Allo credit card recently purchased by Ally Bank. I don't know if they'll change the branding on that one, but that is something you might look into. And then also things like Mission Lane or Mercury. I kind of tend to think of them as a little bit more on the bad credit end, but for some people, they have said that they have gotten decent terms from them as well. So any of those cards could be okay, but you have to understand what you specifically are getting and whether those are going to be right for you. Let's go up a level. If your credit score is between 620 and 640, that might open up some more possibilities to you. I'm going to talk about these in sort of groupings. First off, I'm going to talk about store credit cards. For example, things like the Walmart MasterCard, maybe the Best Buy Visa, the Gap or Old Navy credit cards. All of these are cards that have the possibility of getting a Visa or getting a MasterCard, but then they also have store-only versions. So if you can qualify for one of the MasterCard or Visa versions, well then not only do you have a card that you can use at that store, but you could use it anywhere else that MasterCard or Visa was accepted. So you kind of want to be careful there. You might not be too happy getting stuck with a store-only card. That might be fine with Walmart, but maybe not with some of the other ones. Look for cards from that are issued by Synchrony Bank or Comenity Bank, which is the backing bank of a lot of these cards, and maybe those would be ones that you could qualify for. Now, if you are in this range because you are a college student and you haven't had credit before, but you haven't really done anything wrong in your credit, well, there are a lot of college student credit cards out there on the market that could be a good first credit card for you. Capital One has good ones. Bank of America has good ones. The Discover Student card is popular, and there are other ones out there as well. Now, if you don't have a credit history or much of a credit history and you're not a college student, you might want to look at something like the Chase Slate Edge card that came out within the last year or so that is designed for people that don't really have a credit history. Not a great card, pretty bare bones, but it's no annual fee and it gets you in the door with Chase. If you build that credit score up higher, well then hopefully you can get your hands on other Chase cards as well. Also, somewhat in the same vein, you could look at Capital One's Quicksilver or Quicksilver One cards. These are sort of their lowest level reward cards. Now, if your credit score is a little bit better or they like you a little bit better in terms of your credit history, you could get the Quicksilver that has no annual fee, 1.5% cash back, a pretty decent card in a place where a lot of people start. There's also the Quicksilver One for people that maybe have a little lower credit scores or there's something that Capital One doesn't enjoy as much about your credit history. That's going to have a $39 annual fee, but be mostly the same otherwise. You can do a pre-approval on Capital One's site to try to get an idea of what they would approve you for. Pre-approvals are not guaranteed, but unless there's something weird that has happened with your credit report in the recent past, usually those are going to be a good indication as to whether you'll be approved or not. And then finally, in this 620 to 640 zone, I would say take a look at credit unions. Oftentimes, credit unions are going to be more lenient than the big banks when it comes to people whose credit scores aren't quite as high. Now, there are credit unions on a local level where membership is open to people that live or work or study in a certain area. Oftentimes, their credit cards are going to be kind of bare bones, but again, they might be a little more lenient on credit score, and so that could be something that you would want to take a look at. And then there are national credit unions as well. The biggest of them, Navy Federal Credit Union, open to military and military families. They are much more sophisticated in terms of the credit cards that they offer, but still somewhat lenient in terms of the credit scores where you could qualify for their cards. So make sure you take a look at credit unions as well. All right, let's bump it up to the highest level within the fair credit range as I have established it for this video, from 640 to 700. A lot more credit cards are going to potentially open up to you. However, you should know that the credit card companies are probably going to do a little deeper dive, take a closer look at you in this range than they would if you had a credit score of 760 or 800 or whatever. So you might not get instant approval. You might have lower starting credit lines than you would if you had a higher credit score. They might look closer at your income, the debt you have, how many credit cards you've gotten in the recent past. So they're just going to look closer at the details and make sure that they feel good about you. A lot of cards going to fall into this bucket. Some of the more popular ones, Chase Freedom Unlimited and Chase Freedom Flex, probably all Discover cards, almost all Capital One cards, the Amazon Visa, the Disney credit card, the Citi Rewards Plus card, probably American Express's credit cards, not the charge cards, but things like the Blue Cash Everyday, the Amex Everyday, the American Express Cash Magnet would fall into here, and there are a lot of others as well, but a good number of cards you potentially could be approved within that 640 to 700 range. Now, there are some cards that you're going to have a tough time being approved for under 700. Now, none of this is set in stone, and I'll talk about this again in a second, but things like the American Express Gold and Platinum, Chase's Sapphire Preferred and Sapphire Reserve, probably going to be looking for 700. Bank of America, usually looking for 700 plus. US Bank, the Citi Double Cash and Custom Cash card, mostly probably looking for 700 plus. And there are others out there as well where if you're not 700, maybe you'll have a shot, but oftentimes that's what they're going to be looking for as a minimum. Now, none of this is set in stone. If you have a relationship with a certain bank, maybe you've had a checking account for a while and you've been doing everything right with that account, well then maybe that increases your chances to be approved for one of their credit cards. Or maybe if you have a very high income, even though your credit score is not great, well, high incomes are better than low incomes, and credit card companies will take more of a chance on somebody that makes a lot of money than somebody that makes a more modest amount of money. So it's always going to be a little bit different. If you are, clawing your way back up from bad credit, but it's been a long time since you've really done anything wrong, well, then you might still have a lower credit score, but it's been some time. And if they take a look at you, well, then you're probably more likely to be approved than somebody that had a higher credit score and has backslid. So there's always circumstances that could change the reasons why you are approved or unapproved. And I know people are going to be in the comments and they're going to be saying, I had a credit score that was lower and I got approved for this, or I had a high credit score and I was not approved for this thing that you're saying. None of this is all going to be true across the board on every single thing. This is sort of a rule of thumb, sort of a guide to what cards normally fit in what credit score ranges. And then actually there's one more factor that has nothing to do with you at all, and that is the fact that sometimes the overall economy and the overall state of the credit card industry will have something to do with who is being approved and who is not. If things are going really well, if the credit card companies are feeling good, if they're thinking we want to get more customers in, even if their credit scores are a little more challenged, well then maybe some of these minimums or the scores I'm using, maybe those slide down a little bit. And I would actually say right now the credit card companies are being a little more aggressive as I make this video in 2022 versus 2020 when we were in the middle of COVID and no one knew what was going to happen. So these things can change over time. Sometimes they tighten their belts and you have to have a higher credit score. Sometimes they loosen up and you can have a lower credit score. All right, now it's been about 1.5 years since I last made a best fair credit cards video, and in preparing for this video, I went back to that video and read all of the comments that people had left to see where they thought I was right on target, where I was off base, and I incorporated some of that information into this video. So if you watch this video and you think, yes, that's correct, or no, that is very much incorrect, I would love to hear your feedback in the comments so that I can make an even better video sometime in the future. Now, if you have lasted this long in this video, it looks like you're here for the long haul, so you should probably watch this one.